Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Elsom, and The Guardian's deputy political editor, Jessica Elgott. Welcome and great to see both of you. So as ever, let's take a look at the front pages, starting with the Daily Telegraph. It leads with Sir Keir Starmer's refusal today to commit to Rachel Reeves remaining as Chancellor until the next election. Downing Street later clarified that she would be staying. The Daily Mail describes Ms Reeves and the City Minister, Tulip Siddiq too, as two lame ducks. The latter is facing questions about her interactions with the Bangladeshi government. The Guardian writes that the Prime Minister is backing his Chancellor, and The Star ponders whether it's too soon to make comparisons between Rachel Reeves and Liz Truss and buy themselves another lettuce. The Eye says the government may cut benefits in what it calls a search for new savings. The Times leads with a story on what it calls a threat to free speech, as it reports that pubs could ban customers from speaking on contentious matters. The FT has a story concerning Russian gas tankers being repaired at European shipyards. Daily Express speaks to a farmer who's concerned at the government's decision to continue levying inheritance tax against agricultural landowners. The Metro has the story of Kiana Dawson, whose ex-boyfriend, Ryan Wellings, was today found guilty of assaulting and coercively controlling her, but found not guilty of her manslaughter. Well, we're joined then by Jack and Jessica. Plenty to talk about, not least the Chancellor and her future. A number of newspapers clearly going on this. It was the speech from the PM about AI, railroaded again by the bond markets and the cost of borrowing. Why don't you kick off then, Jack, with the Daily Telegraph?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a torrid time, really, for the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. You wind back to before the election. She was the shadow Chancellor who could walk on water. She could do no wrong, she got businesses on side, and she really did help drag Labour back to that position where they could be fiscally credible, help them win the election. And since then, it has been all downhill. You think about the winter fuel cut to 10 million pensioners. You think about the farmers' inheritance tax, the budget where the OBR said we were going to get anaemic growth at best. Questions over her CV, and now we have bond yields at their highest in about 30 years. So it hasn't been very good for Rachel Reeves of late, and of course that has now prompted questions about her future. Keir Starmer today twice refused to say that she would be the Chancellor by the next election. Number 10 then forced to almost row back on this and do a bit of a clean-up operation later on, saying she would be Chancellor before the next election. The problem is that no one's really sure where they stand, and now you have a bit of a two-tier cabinet where some people have been declared safe, others haven't. It's a bit like an episode of The Traitors, I guess, isn't it?
I'm not sure we go that far. But yes, another picture of Rachel. Everyone talked about how at PMQ's last Wednesday, you know, she looked deeply concerned and deep in thought, you know, the weight of the world on her shoulders. How's your paper reporting this then? I'm just trying to... Yes, you have written it. I'm just double-checking.
Yes.
But anyway, so, so what's the feeling from The Guardian then?
So, I mean, obviously, Keir Starmer's found himself in this quite ridiculous situation for a new Prime Minister where he's having to commit to keeping his cabinet there for the entire of this Parliament, and that's because at one point a spokesman said that David Lammy would be there for the whole Parliament, and now it's sort of judged on that measure of whether anyone's going to be there for the entire time, which would be the first time in a very long time that an entire cabinet stays the same. Look, nobody has been more closely associated with the kind of Keir Starmer project, the renewal of the Labour Party, and this election victory, that reputation for fiscal credibility than Rachel Reeves. That, you know, when you hear Rachel Reeves talks, she often talks about we. She uses that we to describe her and Keir Starmer, this kind of PM and Chancellor walking in lockstep, very much modelled on the idea of David Cameron and George Osborne rather than Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. And to see how, you know, at the moment, that's still the case about the closeness between the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. Where the doubts are emerging is probably on the Labour backbenches. You know, people saying that they expect, you know, the winter fuel allowance, I think, was one of the things that sort of set a few worries going in the Labour backbenches. But looking at what's happened now to, you know, in the bond markets, seeing how even, you know, a really tough budget, which included a huge amount of public spending, you know, seems to be spooking the markets in a way that does make us a slight international outlier. There obviously are international factors in it, but there still seems to be things, particularly the National Insurance bonus rise for employers that have really made people think, is Britain the best place to invest?
Yeah, and interestingly, the Daily Telegraph lists all sorts of things, actually. The turmoil in Britain's financial markets continued today. Oil prices soaring, raising concerns about inflation once again. The pound fell to a new 14-month low. Goldman Sachs, one of the banks, forecasting that sterling will fall to 120 against the dollar over the next year. This is on top of Sir Keir twice not quite saying that she'll be there for the duration. So the question is, does there need to be some emergency statement? What do they do about it? And we remember Rachel Reeves saying that what had happened to Liz Truss haunted her, and that is why she was so cautious. And yet she has the same issue of the cost of borrowing that Liz Truss had. So she must be feeling, you know, deeply concerned about
She's
this.
definitely feeling under the cosh, especially because you said she was the first one out of the gate when Liz Truss was, putting the economy down the Swanee, putting the boot in.
Not allowed to say crashing the economy. You've got a cease and desist.
Well, yeah, sorry, no, I don't want a legal letter coming through the door. I think Jess is totally right, though. I don't think there are serious discussions at the moment about Rachel Reeves being sacked by Keir Starmer. This is not a Blair-Brown relationship where they are at loggerheads together and Tony Blair only finds out the budget scorecard the day before the budget itself. You know, they are in lockstep. This is Keir Starmer's budget as much as it is Rachel Reeves. They are so allied to each other. If you sack your Chancellor, as Liz Truss did with Kwasi Kwarteng, then you might be the next one to go. So I don't think there's any serious discussion of that happening. In terms of an economic package, well, Rachel Reeves, again, and we talk about her boxing herself in a lot, she's boxed herself in with the fact she's only committed to have one fiscal statement a year. That's going to be the budget in sometime in the autumn. There will be a spring statement where the OBR gives their forecast, and it's not looking pretty positive at the moment. And so we have this speech, I think, by Darren Jones coming next week, and it's trailed a bit in your paper, Jess, where she says that Darren Jones is going to be getting ruthless with cabinet colleagues, and they're going to have to be finding efficiency savings in their department. But, you know, with an already very tight spending review envelope, where the fat is going to be trimmed remains to be seen at the moment.
Well, indeed, and we saw pictures of her in China. People said she shouldn't have gone to China, etc., but she did. The Eye talks about its benefits that is going to hit the squeeze. Specifically, I think they say disability benefits. The disability benefits bill is now fully on the agenda, as it was always going to be fair, at this time of year, wasn't it?
Yes, and then we're waiting for the results of their look at personal independence payments, which is the ones where the costs have been really rising. Adults with disabilities, what could they do to tweak that? Maybe change the eligibility criteria, maybe make some, require more proof for certain conditions. They might decide that they're going to do a sort of tiered system where at the moment you can either be awarded it or not. So people tend toward giving the most severe awards. Could you give people slightly less if they don't have much less of a disability? I think that there's all of those things are kind of being talked about. But, this has been in the sights of officials in Whitehall for a long time, very much was in the sights of the Tories. And if you are going to have, which we think they will, much more of a fiscal event, as they call it, not a budget. Should we call it a mini budget? But no. in the spring, then looks like this will be the focus of it.
Yeah, OK, and the Daily Mail going for a double whammy of two lame ducks, isn't it? Because the anti-corruption minister is being urged not to recuse herself from corruption issues. But anyway, tell us more about these, the front pages of the Daily Mail's handling of all
yeah,
this.
I mean, this is a vintage Mail front page. Two lame ducks, two Treasury ministers pictured on there, both having pretty miserable times at the moment. We've chatted about Rachel Reeves. Her junior minister, Tulip Siddiq, is under investigation by the number 10 Standards Commissioner for potential breaches of the ministerial code. It stems back to her aunt, who was the sort of despotic ruler of Bangladesh until very recently. Tulip Siddiq was given a few houses by allies of that despotic regime.
Just a few houses.
Just a few houses.
Given to live in.
Given to live in, exactly, properties of that. And so questions now about her ties to that regime. She denies any wrongdoing. Quite funnily today, she was caught outside her house and was smirking as broadcasters suggested to her that she might be the unluckiest anti-corruption minister in history. And now a couple of charities, the UK Anti-Corruption Coalition, have called on her to resign because it's now getting to a point where it's almost farcical, I think, where she holds this brief of being the anti-corruption minister while being investigated to links to a corrupt regime. And so I think there's now pressure building for her to resign. And I think we've all seen this movie before and we see how it ends.
Yeah, the right-leaning papers are sniffing blood, aren't they? That's the point. Daily Star tops it off with a lettuce suggestion that it's time to buy another one. Anyway, ... We'll see what happens. But your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think that if you were to buy a lettuce and have it and leave it until Rachel Reeves is sacked, then it would be a pretty rotten lettuce. I think it would be basically liquid in the bottom of the fridge. I think she's got quite a long way to go. But the fact that we're seeing this 6 months into a Labour government, I think, you know, it won't be
from a very confident Chancellor whose wings are being clipped, I think.
Yeah, and so closely associated with the Prime Minister.
Yeah, and you, the lettuce is well rotten, is it, before...
I think so. I don't think there's any serious prospect currently of Rachel Reeves being sacked or forced to quit anytime soon, although I do like the Star's thought for the day, which says, will Rachel Reeves romaine?
Anyway, we're now talking about the rot level of a lettuce around the Chancellor. It's not ideal for number 11, is it? Lots more still to come, including some MPs are changing their minds over the need for a national inquiry into grooming gangs. That and plenty more in just a moment.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
President for a second time.
That reason being to save our country, he said.
A remarkable moment, isn't it?
Another chance, another 4 years. The question is, what does he do with those 4 years?
Watch the inauguration of Donald Trump as he becomes president for the second time.
So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. President.
The full story, first on Sky News.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters. We love Trump! I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important, it's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor. Free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
A police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem. Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Well, you're watching the press preview with me once again, Jack Elsom and Jessica Elgott. Welcome back to both of you. Let's head to the Telegraph, shall we, Jessica? And this pressure for a national inquiry into grooming gangs, which many MPs had said, we know the information, it's just going to delay action. Some of those MPs are beginning to change their mind, is what this is saying.
And it feels like those MPs were sort of following after Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, said that he, might be in favour of a limited inquiry that was drawing the lessons on from these local inquiries to see where are the patterns across the country. And Sarah Champion, the MP for Rotherham, obviously, that hotspot for one of these big scandals, said that she has now said that she doesn't think that anything less than that will be able to truly learn the lessons. Paul Ward, the new MP for Rochdale, also saying, that he thinks that there's a case for it. So perhaps there is a bit of momentum building for it. I think that the government's probably at the stage now is hoping that maybe some of this is kind of dropping off the agenda and it can go back to doing what it wants to do, which is these locally focused inquiries. But we'll see if pressure starts to come from Labour MPs, it might start to build up again.
The pressure from Elon Musk, he's moved on to something else, is the point, I suppose.
Well, also maybe the pressure from their constituents. You can imagine, because last week when they had this vote, obviously, and listen, like you can argue about the vote itself. It was obviously crowbarred in there by the Tories and was never going to be acceptable to Labour. However, we didn't see last week many Labour MPs break ranks with their leadership and call for that national inquiry. And I just wonder whether this trickle of Labour MPs coming out now, especially lots of them in those hotspot areas which were most afflicted by the grooming scandal, maybe their postbags are absolutely bursting with voters who are saying, no, we want a national inquiry. We don't really think that this country has had its moment of reckoning over this scandal, and we'd like to see our day in court. And, I think that there was a poll last week which showed that about 74% of the public actually would support a national inquiry. Now, whether Keir Starmer actually acts on this, I think remains to be seen. Probably not. He's been pretty resolute in his view that we don't need another inquiry on top of the J report, which reported back in 2021. They are more focused now on implementing those recommendations. The problem is, as well, is that it's very difficult to get a uniform view with victims. We have Number 10 saying that we're going to be led by the victims in our response, but there's not one homogenous view with that, because some victims are saying we want J recommendations to go forward and we don't want another national inquiry. It's a bit even traumatic to open this up again. But then you have other victims who say that's exactly what we want. So it's a really fine balancing act which the government are doing. I can't see them giving into this national inquiry anytime soon.
Let's go abroad then, shall we now? Critical prospects of a ceasefire now in Gaza, the release of the hostages held since October the 7th, more than a year ago. Certainly tonight, Joe Biden saying it's coming closer to fruition. High-level talks in Qatar tomorrow for final details is how they've described it. But, everyone's waiting to see, with the deadline, of course, the sense of a deadline, the inauguration of Donald Trump next week.
Yes, and it very much feels like all of the leaders in the region see that inauguration of Donald Trump as the deadline to get a deal done in order to release these hostages and finally end, the terrible turmoil, trauma that the people of Gaza have been through during this bombardment. It seems like the deal is very, very close. It's 14 months of war now, and the final draft seems to be there now for tweaks in Qatar, and it's the closest I think we've got in these 14 months.
Yes, and we see Joe Biden there, his final foreign policy speech, it's the end of a very long, decades-long political career for him. The final few days, we'll see what else comes up, and certainly keep a close eye on those talks in Qatar. In the meantime, The Times suggesting that pub chat will be controlled and dictated because of Labour policy, a Labour law. So explain this one to us if you can.
Yes, interesting story in the front of The Times tomorrow. This revolves around this employment rights bill, one of Labour's flagship pieces of legislation that affords sweeping rights to employers, one of which is freedom from harassment in the workplace. And so The Times have picked up on a sort of small quirk of this, which is that people behind bars will be immune under this law to any sort of harassment. But the Equality and Human Rights Commission, the sort of watchdog on equality in this country, has said that a byproduct of that could be that people would have to limit themselves in terms of banter, talking about religious views, views on transgender rights in pubs and bars under this law. And so barmaids and landlords could potentially kick out anyone who sort of breaches that right. And, obviously it's going to provoke a bit of a free speech row.
Yeah, very interesting. Jack Elsom, Jessica Elgott, as ever, thank you. We'll see more from you both in the 11. Right now, let's take a peek at the weather, shall we? And a southwesterly flow is making it milder for most parts, but southern Britain will take time to warm up. There'll be a mostly mild start tomorrow then, with low cloud, hill fog and some drizzly outbreaks over central parts. The clearer south may see some pockets of frost and fog again. The morning will be rather dull overall, hill fog, further patchy drizzle over much of Ireland and central Britain. Most other places, though, will be dry. Well, coming up next on Sky News at 11, our press preview will continue. More of our look at the newspapers with our guests tonight, Jack Elsom and Jessica Elgott. Back in just a moment.